I thought I had finally found love again, but it was all a lie. He was a lonely widower who thought he'd found a second chance at happiness. She was a charming caregiver who promised him the world. But behind the smiles was a devastating plan to take everything. This is a story of a $1.3 million romance fraud. For Robert, a 74-year-old retired architect, the silence in his home was deafening. It had been 3 years since his wife of nearly 5 decades passed away, and the color of his world had faded to gray. His days, once full of shared laughter, now just stretched into a monotonous quiet. His children were grown, busy with their own families. They called when they could, but it wasn't the same. Robert was deeply, painfully alone. This is an emotional space where so many romance scams are born, not out of greed, but from a deep, aching loneliness. Major life events, especially in our later years, losing a spouse, retiring, or kids moving away, can create a huge emotional void. Scammers aren't looking for fools. They're looking for the vulnerable. And Robert, a kind, trusting man with a comfortable nest egg he'd spent a lifetime building, was their perfect target. He wasn't looking for more money. He was looking for a connection, for a hand to hold, for someone to fill the echoing silence. The world of online dating seemed like a lifeline. On the advice of friends, he cautiously created a profile on a site for seniors. He posted a few pictures, one from his retirement party, another next to a building he designed. His bio was honest. He wrote about his love for classical music, his passion for gardening, and his hope of finding someone to share life's simple joys with. He had no idea he was essentially posting an advertisement for his own financial ruin. The personal details people share on dating sites and social media are a goldmine for scammers. For the organized criminal gangs who run these operations, Robert's profile signals stability, a trusting nature, and a heart that was open and ready to be captured. It didn't take long for a message to arrive. Her name was Isabella. Her profile picture showed a woman in her late 40s with a warm, disarming smile. She said she was a caregiver who had recently moved to the area. Her message was different. It was thoughtful. She mentioned his love for gardening and asked about the roses he grew. It felt personal. It felt real. From there, it was a whirlwind. Isabella was everything Robert could have hoped for. She was attentive, compassionate, and her replies were almost instant, no matter the time of day. This is a classic tactic called love bombing. Scammers shower their targets with constant affection and compliments to create a powerful, false sense of intimacy. They use phrases like, "I've never felt this way before," or "I feel like I've known you my whole life." This intense emotional manipulation triggers a rush of dopamine in the brain, which can easily overwhelm logic. Isabella was a master of the craft. She mirrored his interests and molded her opinions to his. When he talked about his late wife, she'd share fabricated stories of her own past heartbreaks, creating the illusion of a perfect, instant connection. For Robert, who had been starved of affection, it was intoxicating. He was falling in love, not with a real person, but with a carefully constructed character designed to exploit his deepest needs. The relationship quickly moved from the dating site to a private messaging app like WhatsApp. This is another key strategy, meant to move the conversation to a more intimate and less monitored space. The messages were relentless. They would chat late into the night, depriving Robert's sleep and making him even more dependent on her. This cult-like control method made Isabella the center of his world. She positioned herself as the only person who truly understood him, the only one who could heal his loneliness. Within weeks, Robert's heart was completely captured. She spoke of a future together, moving in to care for him, traveling the world. For the first time in years, he felt a genuine surge of hope. He was building a new life with this incredible woman. He was caught in what's known as a sunk cost fallacy. He had already invested so much emotion that the thought of it not being real was just too painful to consider. After weeks of a picture-perfect dream, the nightmare began. It started small. Isabella messaged him one night, frantic. Her mother, she said, had a sudden medical emergency, and she was a few $100s short for the hospital bill. Eager to be the hero, Robert didn't hesitate. He wired the money. This is a pivot point in nearly every romance scam. The first ask, it's a test. Once a victim sends money, the scammer knows they're hooked. The requests, which usually start small, are always framed as urgent emergencies: a medical crisis, a legal problem, unexpected travel costs. A week later, another crisis. Isabella's laptop, essential for her caregiver certification, was broken. She needed $2,000 for a new one so she could finish her courses and finally come be with him. Again, Robert paid. In his mind, it was an investment in their future together. As Robert became more financially invested, Isabella moved to the next phase: isolation. She subtly, then openly, drove a wedge between Robert and his family. She complained that his children were suspicious of her and didn't understand their love. She would say things like, "Let's keep this between us. It's our little secret." A classic tactic to stop others from interfering. If Robert mentioned his son questioning a money transfer, Isabella would feign heartbreak, making him feel guilty for doubting her. The constant manipulation was eroding Robert's judgment. His only anchor was Isabella, with Robert isolated and dependent. The financial demands exploded. Isabella's stories grew more elaborate. She claimed she was working on an oil rig overseas, a common lie used by scammers to explain why they can't meet in person. There was an equipment failure, and she needed $25,000 to cover damages or she'd face legal action. Clouded by love and fear for her safety, Robert took the money from his savings. This is a hallmark of a particularly vicious type of fraud known as pig butchering, where scammers fatten up their victims with love and trust before financially slaughtering them. The requests for money snowballed, often involving wire transfers, gift cards, and cryptocurrency, all methods that are difficult to trace and nearly impossible to reverse. Whenever Robert suggested meeting or even a video call, Isabella had an excuse. The oil rig had no camera policy. Her phone's camera was broken. The internet was bad where she was. Scammers almost always avoid video calls because it would expose their real identity. The beautiful photos on Isabella's profile were stolen from an innocent person's social media account, a practice known as catfishing. Over the next year, the emergencies continued. There was money to bribe a customs official, funds for urgent legal fees. Each time, Robert paid, draining his retirement accounts. He had sent a total of $500,000. He believed he was funding their future. In reality, he was funding a criminal enterprise. Having already extracted $500,000, the scammer went in for the final, devastating move. Isabella's messages became filled with concern for Robert's well-being. As his partner and a caregiver, she said she was worried about what would happen if he fell ill. She insisted that he grant her power of attorney. She framed it as an act of love, a way for her to manage his affairs and protect him. It would make it easier to build their life together. She promised. Trusting her completely, Robert signed the documents. He had just handed over the keys to his entire financial life to a ghost. With legal control secured, the end game was swift. Isabella convinced Robert that to protect his assets from unnecessary taxes and the prying eyes of his children, he should add her name to his bank accounts and rewrite his will, making her the primary beneficiary. Believing this was a final step before they could finally be together, Robert agreed. The moment the ink was dry, the illusion shattered. First, the large withdrawals began. Tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of dollars vanished from his accounts, wired to overseas banks. Robert tried to call Isabella, but her number was disconnected. His frantic messages went unanswered. Her profiles on the dating site and social media disappeared. She was gone. In less than 2 weeks, every liquid asset Robert had was gone. His checking and savings accounts, his investment portfolio, all drained. The total was staggering: $1.3 million. Isabella, the woman he loved, the woman he was going to spend the rest of his life with, had never existed. He was left with an empty house, an empty bank account, and a broken heart. The final gut-wrenching blow came not from a message, but from his bank's fraud department. They were calling to verify one last massive wire transfer that would have overdrawn his now empty account. As the banker calmly walked him through the list of withdrawals, the fantasy world Isabella had built came crashing down. The shame was immediate and suffocating. The emotional toll of a romance scam is often far worse than the financial loss. Victims are forced to grieve a relationship that was never real and a person who never existed. They experience profound betrayal, depression, and anxiety. Many are so embarrassed they never report the crime, which only isolates them further. When Robert finally told his children, they weren't angry. They were heartbroken for him. They saw a man completely hollowed out. Robert's story, while shocking, is tragically common. The FTC reported that total fraud losses in 2024 jumped to an unprecedented $12.5 billion. While the median loss for a romance scam victim is around $2,000, some, like Robert, lose everything. His family immediately contacted law enforcement and the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3. But the hard truth is that recovering money from these sophisticated, often international criminal rings is incredibly difficult. The funds are moved quickly through a complex web of accounts and converted to cryptocurrency, making them almost impossible to trace. In some twisted cases, victims are even manipulated into becoming money mules, using their own accounts to launder funds from other victims, turning them from a target into an unwitting accomplice. For Robert, the money was gone forever. Robert's story is a devastating cautionary tale, but it holds vital lessons. Scammers are experts, but their tactics are predictable. Recognizing the red flags is your best defense. Here are the key warning signs. First, they move fast but never meet. Scammers profess love incredibly quickly, but always have an excuse for why they can't meet in person or on a live video call. They often claim to be working overseas, in the military, or on an oil rig. If you haven't seen them live on video after a few weeks, be extremely suspicious. And now, scammers are even using AI-generated voices and deepfake videos to make their lies more convincing. So insist on a truly live, interactive conversation. Second, they try to isolate you. A scammer will try to drive a wedge between you and your loved ones. They'll pressure you to keep the relationship a secret, claiming others are just jealous or don't understand. This is a manipulation tactic to remove anyone who might spot the scam. Third, they always ask for money. This is the ultimate goal. The requests start small and are always tied to an urgent, emotional story. They will specifically demand payment via wire transfers, gift cards, or cryptocurrency because these methods are like sending cash, untraceable and irreversible. Never, ever send money to someone you have only met online. If you suspect you or someone you know is being scammed, stop all communication immediately. Talk to a trusted friend or family member. And most importantly, report it. You can file a complaint with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center at ic3.gov and with your local police. Don't be embarrassed. Reporting the crime is the only way to help stop these criminals from destroying more lives. The search for love is a fundamental human need. Scammers exploit this with surgical precision, turning a person's vulnerability into their financial gain. Robert's story started with loneliness and ended in devastation. He lost his life savings, but the deeper wound was the theft of his trust and his hope for a happy future. His story is a stark reminder that while we should keep our hearts open, we must also guard our wallets. Please share the story. You never know whose parent, friend, or neighbor you might be protecting. The conversation you start today could be the one that saves someone from $1 million heartbreak. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more investigations into the stories that impact us all.